Well, guys, here goes night 3 of reading the book Witch Week. I got two new beauties here. I think you all saw this one before from my last YouTube videos. This one was Kitty. As you can see, I have them off the stand so they can stand up by themselves. They're kind of big right now, but anyway, uh, this one is Sadie, my newest porcelain doll. This cute beauty. Love this little girl. She's actually French made with the French buttons and stuff like that. And after this video, we could actually take a close look up of these dolls. But anyway, for now, let's get into chapter 2, shall we? Of Witch Week. The next day was the day Miss Hodge tried to find out who had written the note. It was also the worst day either Nan Pilgrim or Charles Morgan had ever spent in Lardwood House. It did not begin too badly for Charles, but Nan was late for breakfast. She had broken her shoelace. She was told off by Mr. Towers for being late, and then by a monitor. By this time, the only table with a place was one where all the others were boys. Nan slid into the place horribly embarrassed. They had eaten all the toast already, except for one slice. Simon Silverson took that slice as Nan arrived. Bad luck, Fatso, from further down the table. Nan saw Charles Morgan looking at her. It was meant to be a look of sympathy. Like all Charles' looks, it came out like a blank double-barrel glare. Nan pretended not to see it, and did her best to eat wet. Pale scrambled egg on its own. At lessons, she discovered that Teresa and her friends had started a new craze. That was a bad sign. They were always more than usually pleased with themselves at the heart of a craze, even though this one had probably started so that they need not think of witches or birds. The craze was white knitting, white and clean and fluffy, which you kept wrapped in a towel so that it would stay clean. The classroom filled with mutters of two pearl, one plain, twist, two. But the day really got into its evil stride. In the middle of the morning during PE, Larwood House had that every day. Like the Journal 6B joined with 6C and 6D, and the boys went running into the field, while the girls went together to the gym. The climbing ropes were let down there. Teresa and Estelle and the rest gave glad cries and went shining up the ropes. With easy swinging pulls, Nan tried to lurk out of sight against the wall bars. Her heart fell with a flop into her gym shoes. This was worse even than the vaulting horse. Nan simply could not climb ropes. She had been born without the proper muscles or something. And since it was that kind of day, Miss Phillips spotted Nan almost at once. "Nan, you haven't had a turn yet." Teresa, Delia, Estelle, come on down and let Nan have her turn on the ropes. Teresa and the rest came down readily. They knew they were about to see some fun. Nan saw their faces and grinded her teeth. This time she vowed she would do it. She would climb right up to the ceiling and wipe that grin off Teresa's face. Nevertheless, the distance to the ropes seemed several hundred shiny yards. Nan's legs in the floppy divided skirt they wore for gym had gone mauve and wide, and her arms felt like weak pink puddings. When she reached the rope, the knot on the end of it seemed to hang rather higher than her head, and she was supposed to stand on that knot somehow. She gripped the rope in her fat, weak hands and jumped. All that happened was that the knot hit her heavily in the chest and her feet dropped sharply to the floor again. A murmur of amusement began among Teresa and her friends. Nan could hardly believe it. This was ridiculous, worse than usual. She could not even get off the floor now. She took a new grip on the rope and jumped again and again and again, and she leaped and leaped, bounding like a floppy kangaroo. And still the knot kept hitting her in the chest, and her feet kept hitting the floor. The murmurs of the rest grew into giggles and then outright laughter, until at last, when Nan was almost ready to give up, her feet somehow found the knot and gripped and hung on, and there she clung, upside down like a sloth, breathless and sweating from arms which did not seem to work anymore. This was terrible, and she still had to climb up the rope. She wondered whether to fall off on her back and die. Miss Phillips was beside her. "Come on, Nan, stand up on the knot." Somehow, feeling it was superhuman of her, Nan managed to lever herself upright. She stood there wobbling gently round in little circles, while Miss Phillips, her face level with Nan's trembling knees, kindly and patiently explained for the 100th time exactly how to climb a rope. Nan clenched her teeth. She would do it. Everyone else did. It must be possible. She shut her eyes to shut out the other girls' grinning faces and did as Miss Phillips told her. She took a strong and careful grip on the rope above her head. Carefully, she put the rope between the top of one foot and the bottom of the other. She kept her eyes shut firmly. She pulled with her arms crisply. She pulled her feet up behind, gripped again, reached up again with careful concentration. Yes, this was it. She was doing it at last. The secret must be to keep your eyes shut. She gripped and pulled. She could feel her body easily swinging upward toward the ceiling just as the others did. But around her, the giggles grew to laughter, and the laughter grew into screams, then shouts, and became a perfect storm of hilarity. Puzzled Nan opened her eyes all around her at knee level. She saw laughing red faces, tears running out of eyes, and people doubled over yelling with mirth. Even Miss Phillips was biting her lip and snorting a little. And small wonder, Nan looked down to find her gym shoes still resting on the floor, on the knot, at the bottom of the rope. After all the climbing, she was still standing on the knot. Nan tried to laugh too. She was sure it had been very funny, but it was hard to be amused. Her only consolation was that after that, none of the other girls could climb the ropes either. They were too weak with laughing. The boys, meanwhile, were running around and round in the field. They were stripped to little pale blue running shorts and splashing through the dew in big spiked shoes. It was against the rules to run in anything but spikes. They were against the rules. They were divided into little groups of laboring legs. The quick group of legs in front with muscles belonged to Simon Silverson and his friends, and to Brian Wentworth. Brian was a good runner in spite of his short legs. Brian was prudently trying to keep to the rear of Simon, but every so often the sheer joy of running overcame him, and he went ahead. Then he would get bumped and jostled by Simon's friends, for everyone knew it was Simon's right to be in front. The group of legs behind these were paler and moved without enthusiasm. These belonged to Dan Smith and his friends. All of them could have run at least as fast as Simon Silverson, but they were saving themselves for better things. They loped along easily, chatting among themselves. Then they kept bursting into laughter. Behind these again labored an assorted group of legs, mauve legs, fat legs, bright white legs, legs with no muscles at all, and the great brown legs of Narumph Singh, which seemed too heavy for the rest of Narumph's skinny body to lift. Everyone in the group was too breathless to talk. Their faces wore assorted expressions of woe. The last pair of legs, far in the rear, belonged to Charles Morgan. There was nothing peculiarly wrong with Charles' legs, except that his feet were in ordinary school shoes and soaked through. He was always behind he chose to be. This was one of the few things in the day when he could be alone to think. He had discovered that as long as he was thinking of something else, he could keep up his slow trot for hours. and think. The only interruptions he had to fear were when the other groups came pounding past him. He was tangled up in their efforts for a few seconds, or when Mr. Towers, encased in his nice worn tracksuit, came whopping up alongside and called ill-advised encouragements to Charles. So Charles trotted slowly on, thinking he gave himself over to hating Larwood House. He hated the field under his feet, the shivering autumn trees that dripped on him, the white goalposts and the neat line of pine trees in front of the spiked wall that kept everyone in. Then, when he swung around the corner and had a view of the school buildings, he hated them more. They were built of a purplish sort of brick. Charles thought it was the color a person's face would go if he was choking. He thought of the long cords inside painted caterpillar green, the thick radiators which were never warm, the brown classrooms, the frosty white dormitories, and the smell of school food. He was almost in an ecstasy of hate. Then he looked at the groups of legs straggling around the field ahead, and he hated all the people in the school, most horribly of all. Upon that, he found he was remembering the witch being burned. It swept into his head unbidden, as it always did, only today it seemed worse than usual. Charles found he was remembering things he had not noticed at the time, the exact shape of the flames just leaping from small to large, and the way the fat man who was a witch had bent sideways away from them. He could see the man's exact face, the rather blobby nose with the wart on it, the sweat on it, and the flame shining off the man's eyes and the sweat. Above all, he could see the man's expressions. It was astounding. The fat man had not believed he was going to die until the moment Charles saw him. He must have thought his witchcraft could save him. Now he knew it could not, and he was horrified. Charles was horrified too. He trotted along in a sort of trance of horror, but there was the smart red suit of Mr. Towers lopping along beside him. Charles, what are you doing running in walking shoes? The fat witch vanished. Charles should have been glad, but he was not. His thinking had been interrupted, and he was not private anymore. I said, "Why are you wearing your spiked shoes?" Mr. Towers said. Charles slowed down a little while. He wondered what to reply. Mr. Towers trotted springily beside him, waiting for an answer, because he was not thinking anymore. Charles found his legs a ching and his chest sore. That annoyed him. He was even more annoyed about his spikes. He knew Dan Smith had hidden them. That was why that group were laughing. Charles could see their faces craning over their shoulders as they ran to see what he was telling Mr. Towers. That annoyed him even more. Charles did not usually have this kind of trouble the way Brian Whitworth did. His double-barreled nasty look had kept him safe up to now. If only, but he foresaw he was going to have to think of something more than just looking into his future. He felt very bitter. Well, guys, I'm just gonna cut it there because I feel like y'all are gonna get bored with this stuff because it's not very interesting, like not a lot of people want to read books. But if you want me to keep going, just comment down below, and comment what you want me to post every day, because I'm gonna do an update of my doll collection. I have got new dolls that y'all haven't seen in the past just yet. But before I go and before I say comment, subscribe, leave a like, click that notifications button, let's get a closer look at these two. As you can see, this right here is Miss Kitty. I think y'all saw her before, right? Yeah, that's Miss Kitty. Then this beautiful girl over here is Sadie. I got her. As you can see, she's French made. All made in French. But anyway, I like her. She's cute. And yeah, I'm gonna cut this video short for now. But if y'all guys want me to read the rest of this book, just let me know. Comment, like I said, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and leave a like and keep it frosty, stay lit, and let your diamonds hang.